Welcome and thanks very much for joining me. My name's Nicole Hamilton. I'm a physiotherapist with Synergy Physio on the Sunshine Coast of Queensland, Australia. What I'd like to do today is to share some advice and tips on how to manage insertional hamstring pain, so buttock pain, and how best to adjust your yoga practice around this. So there can be many reasons for deep buttock pain, which is why it's always best to get an individual assessment or diagnosis from your health practitioner. But what we'll be focusing on today is buttock pain that occurs as a result of the hamstring tendon where it attaches onto the pelvis. Pain from the hamstring tendon commonly is aggravated by sitting on hard surfaces, walking or running with long strides, and certain yoga postures. Let's start by having a look at our anatomy. So if we look at the bony pelvis, your pelvis is formed of a ring of 3 bones which connect together to form a circle. And the base of your pelvis you have your sitting bones, which are called your ischial tuberosity, and it's here where your hamstring muscles attach. So your hamstring muscles come up, they form like a spring before turning into a short tendon, which is like a rope, before it attaches onto the bone. So it's springy muscle, short rope-like tendon, and then bone. So what happens with tendon-related pain? As we know from our anatomy, tendons are designed to be thick, firm places of attachment for our muscle onto our bone. So if you can imagine your tendon a little bit like a thick rope, what researchers have found is that when people have tendon-related pain, it's almost like the rope has started to fray a little bit. So if you can imagine a frayed rope, you certainly don't want to stretch a frayed rope, you don't want to overload a frayed rope. What you really want to do is to take the pressure off and to stitch some new fibres in that rope so it's ready to go again. Our tendons are a little bit the same, so if we have signs of tendon wear, which we call tendinopathy, what we really need to do is to take the pressure off, avoid stretching it, avoid overloading it, and then start a series of exercises in order to strengthen and repair that tendon so we can use our own healing processes in order to restitch some new fibres in. So how can we protect this hamstring tendon from further irritation? Well, the most important thing is to avoid really strong hamstring stretches, which is actually quite difficult in a yoga class, as you'd know, because there's a lot of hamstring stretches in yoga classes. So my suggestion initially would be to try and incorporate more back bends and more twists into your practice. Let's look a little bit further about how we might be able to modify some of our postures. If we start with a basic forward fold, such as with a pyramid pose, if you go too deep into the stretch, you're actually going to be loading that tendon into a really big stretch over the ischial tuberosity or the pelvic bone, which a frayed tendon is not going to be happy with. So my suggestion with forward fold stretch such as this is to just come halfway up and then start to focus on other parts within the posture that you might like to adjust subtly, which might be, can you keep your pelvis pointing straight ahead? So if you had hip headlights on your pelvis, would they be pointing straight ahead? Do you have your weight equal between both feet? Can you relax your shoulders and open up the back of the neck? Can you focus on your breathing? So in forward folds, now is the time to focus on the subtle adjustments within the posture rather than aiming to go too far into the posture and add excessive load onto that tendon. So another one of the standing postures that you can modify to protect your hamstring tendon is revolved trikonasana. So you can see in this position there's a big forward fold which can place a big stretch on that hamstring tendon where it attaches onto the bone. So the way to modify this would be to come out of the fold, so you come up a little bit and you can create more twist. So you can focus on the posture with the twist perhaps, which will take a little bit of pressure out of the hamstring, and work on your breathing and your other postural adjustments that you need to. So downward facing dog is another posture that can place stretch and load onto the hamstring tendon where it attaches onto the pelvic ischial tuberosity. The way I would adjust or modify this would be to bend the knees very slightly to take some of the stretch out of the hamstring tendon, and then spend some time in the posture rather than trying to push deeper, trying to make subtle adjustments within your own posture. These adjustments could include, can you keep your weight evenly distributed from the outside of your hand to the inside of your hand? Can you spin your arm bones outward? Can you relax your jaw and your neck? And can you focus on your breathing? So these are nice adjustments that you can make rather than trying to push further into the posture until your hamstring tendon heals. Okay, so Uttanasana is another posture that, again, with a forward fold can place a lot of stretch onto that outside hamstring tendon. So my suggestion is definitely don't go so deep in this posture, bend your knees and use a block, and then focus on other postural alignment cues such as your breathing and your neck or your jaw to try and make sure you can get the most out of this posture without actually overstretching your hamstring. My suggestion for any seated forward folds to protect the hamstring tendon is to firstly use a bolster just to lift the hips a little bit, and then also to use a belt and not to go so deep. So using a belt will actually allow you to focus on other areas of your body, such as can you open your heart and keep your scapula connected? Can you lengthen the back of your spine, lengthen the back of the neck and focus on the breathing? The idea is that you can focus on other parts of your posture without going so far into the fold. Postures such as back bends, twists, or any of the standing postures in the Vira-2 family are usually fine for hamstring tendinopathy, as they don't tend to overstretch the tendon over the ischial tuberosity. So try to include a little bit more of this throughout your practice until your tendon recovers. Tendon recovery can be typically slow due to the limited blood supply in all tendons. So my advice would be to have some patience in your recovery and also to seek the advice of a physiotherapist who might be able to provide you with a very specific strengthening exercise program for your tendon in order to aid its healing and recovery process. Thanks very much for joining me, and I hope the information that I've provided has helped you find ways of modifying your yoga practice to help you with your recovery.